Last month, I'm watching the hurricane clobber Jamaica. That great gray spiral wobbling on satellite feels like a drunk top, and something strikes me. The only people the news channels interview are tourists, sunburned, slightly shell shocked, people in resort lobbies clutching cocktails, murmuring about flight cancellations. The locals appear only in the background shots, anonymous figures boarding up windows or wading through floodwater. The newscasters don't ask them questions. The disaster, apparently, is only real when it ruins someone's vacation. You can learn a lot about a culture by what it calls breaking news. When the storm hits Kingston, the ticker talks about tourist disruption, economic impact, insurance losses. The priorities are financial and foreign. The story is told for an audience of anxious suburbanites thousands of miles away who watch and think, what if that had been us? The island in this narrative isn't a home, it's a backdrop, a paradise temporarily spoiled. This isn't just laziness, it's design. The 24-hour news cycle caters to the people advertisers care about, middle class Westerners with purchasing power. That's who they're talking to. The faces they choose to show, comfortable, relatable, are the faces of the presumed viewer. The coverage reassures its audience that the world still orbits around them, even when nature momentarily disagrees. And beneath that, something older. A ghost from the empire, the Caribbean, long the playground of colonial appetite, remains trapped in tourism trance. Once it was sugar plantations. Now it's all inclusive resorts. Different extraction, same gaze. The West still looks at these islands as service providers, places that exist to host pleasure, not to have histories or heartbreaks of their own. The hurricane through the camera's lens isn't weather, it's a service interruption. Watch how the anchors speak. The language is always economic, billions in damages, tourism industry crippled. The loss of human life is a footnote sandwiched between rainfall data and GDP projections. We measure disaster in capital because capital is the only universal language left. It's quantifiable, tradable, morally neutral. To ask how many homes collapsed or how many communities will never recover requires empathy, doesn't it? To say a $2 billion loss requires only arithmetic. And so empathy collapses into commerce. The lives of the poor are background noise in the great theater of business continuity. The camera swivels toward the beachfront where the insured suffer photogenically. The people inland, without the luxury of evacuation, are not photogenic. Their pain can't be monetized. This is what philosophers call epistemic injustice, who gets to define what counts as knowledge, whose voice is heard as truth. The Western journalist parachuting in with a microphone and a flak jacket speaks for a population that is never allowed to speak for itself. The locals become extras in their own catastrophe. Their endurance is rebranded as resilience, their grief as stoicism. They are the color correction in the story, not the authors. And then there's the emotional hierarchy. You can feel it in the tone. When a British family loses luggage in Montego Bay, it's tragedy. When a Jamaican family loses their house in Port Moore, it's local impact. The sympathy is proportioned by passport. The camera decides who deserves tears. This hierarchy has consequences. Aid follows attention. If the story centers on hotel closures, the recovery money flows to the resorts. Reconstruction begins where the tourists will return first. Meanwhile, the inland villages wait untelevised for their roofs. The market logic of sympathy determines who is rebuilt and who is written off. How do we change this? Well, first, by rethinking who tells the story. International networks should not merely use local journalists as guides or fixers. They should feature them. Give them editorial authority, equal pay, equal platform. A disaster story told by those who live it sounds different. It's not about fear, but about adaptation. Memory and the geography of survival. Second, we could abandon the cult of the balance sheet. Let the financial pages fret about losses. The news should ask different questions. Who organized the community shelters? How are people communicating without power? What traditions of mutual aid resurface when formal systems fail? Those are stories about life, not loss. Third, journalists could be trained, yes, trained, to see their own lens, to ask, whose pain am I centering right now? Whose suffering am I aestheticizing? Because there's a difference between documenting and consuming. And audiences, us, can do our part too. Turn the volume down on the corporate channels, read the local press, click on the stories that don't flatter your comfort. Attention is political currency. Spend it carefully. Most importantly, we must stop talking about disaster as spectacle. The storm is not content. It is not beautiful destruction. Every time a correspondent stands dramatically in the wind to prove they're on the ground, they are performing survival as entertainment. The real courage is quieter and untelevised. People sharing food, clearing debris, checking on neighbors. The lens rarely turns there because ordinary compassion doesn't rate. The deeper truth is that media doesn't report the world. It reports what the powerful already believe about the world. The hurricane reveals the ideology beneath the coverage. The world is a marketplace, and some lives are premium stock, while others are expendable inventory. The storm hits everyone, but the narrative always floats back to shore. And so I sit watching the broadcast, or I did, the endless loop of palm trees thrashing in cinematic slow motion, the reporter solemnly announcing that tourism will take years to recover. No mention of the people whose houses have already been swept into the sea. No mention of the ones who never left because they couldn't. The hurricane, it seems, is not the only force that flattens the landscape. The camera does it too.